Are you ready to commit a cardinal sin?
Melina takes in the flame. Her hands have been burned before, which has haunted me. This poses some questions. When did Melina become burned and bodiless? Does this imply a cyclical nature? What happens to the lands between, in the future, or in the past? I am Moxie, and this is Heavy Speculation.
My purpose was given to me by my mother.
I have never been satisfied with the theories about Melina being the Gloam-Eyed Queen or Ronnie Mommy's other half. For one, the Gloam-Eyed Queen has always appeared to have been felled. To address the other half of the sentiment, Ronnie and Melina of course share incredibly similar features, their eyes being the most prominent. This may have more to do with them being burned and bodiless than the likelihood of them being the same person. Perhaps it's a seal preventing their spirits from being returned to the cycle, allowing both of them to remain in their spectral forms. The works of Quelaag, Tarnished Archeologist, and Smoughtown greatly improved my understanding of Elden Ring, and their videos helped me clearly define my ideas. And we are just getting started, so if you like Elden Ring lore, consider subscribing to the channel. It's free and it helps a ton.
All vessels are destined to one day break.
The outer gods are distinct from gods. Any god in the lands between serves an outer god. To become a god, one has to be a child of Queen Marika, a demigod. At least, that is, according to the Golden Order.
The Greattree governs all.
It was not always this way.
You must find kindling.
Even the flame of ruin doesn't make the thorns budge. We must unleash the rune of death. So that takes us to the sky. Legends speak of a storm roaring eternally, carrying the runes of a dignified imperial city. It is said that the ancient royal city of Farum has slowly been crumbling since time immemorial. Here, dragons swarm the sky. The ancient dragons, who ruled in the prehistoric era before the Greattree, would protect their lord as a wall of living rock. Power gleaned from the remembrance of Dragon Lord Placidusax transforms Caster into the Dragon Lord to spew golden breath from above. These are the dying wails of a Dragon Lord who once dwelled eternally beyond time. The death rites came after the Dynast civilization because they depicted the coming of a Greattree, seen as they clutched their tablets like prophets, with vines growing from their feet. Then there's the rune's greatsword. Originally rubble from a ruin which fell from the sky, this fragment was honed into a weapon. The ruin it came from crumbled when struck by a meteorite. As such, this weapon harbors its destructive power. This gives us some point of context of when these ruins became airborne. There must have been so many meteor showers considering Radahn dedicated his life to stopping the stars. Great leaders learn from history. The Elden Ring, depicted in Malekith's boss chamber, perplexes me, though below this depiction appears to be a maiden praying, surrounded by 3 wolves. These immediately reminded me of the Shadowbound, almost like an ancient version. Shadowbound are assigned by the Greater Will to the Empyreans to keep them from straying away from their fate. Many people have speculated that this statue depicts the Gloam-Eyed Queen. According to the Black Flame ritual, the Gloam-Eyed Queen led the apostles. It is said that she was an Empyrean, chosen by the Fingers. This never tells us whether or not she achieved godhood. From her title, it can be implied that she would have been a god based on Queen Marika being a god. But Elden Ring is vague on what being a queen in the lands between means. Queen Rennala also carried this title. So there may be a queen below this depiction of an Elden Ring, but we can't be certain if it's hers. if it's conquered or it's inherited. The roots of the Greattree still cling to the bottom of Farum Azula. According to the Black Flame ritual, the apostles once said to have served destined death are wielders of the god-slaying Black Flame, but after their defeat by Malekith, the Black Blade, the source of their power was sealed away. The Scouring Black Flame, the Black Flame that could once slay gods, but when Malekith sealed destined death, the true power of the Black Flame was lost. The Godslayer Greatsword, sacred sword of the Gloam-Eyed Queen who controlled the Godskin Apostles before her defeat at the hands of Malekith. The Black Blade wielded by the Apostles are channeled from this sword. This sword tells us that Malekith felled the Gloam-Eyed Queen, who is a vassal of Marika. Marika wanted to seal death. But why? Considering the Golden Order formed immediately following this event, it's safe to say that this was the goal that she was pursuing. There's a lot of time between the War of the Fire Giants and the Gloam-Eyed Queen's reign. The Elden Ring has taken many forms and is not immediately obvious to our Tarnished.
The burning of the Earth Tree is the first cardinal sin. That is not the domain of mere men.
This comes from Fire's deadly sin incantation that also tells us, the prophet despaired, looking up at the Earth Tree, for soon the kindling would burst into flame, bringing ruin. The Earth Tree can only be burnt using the flame of ruin within the mountaintops of the giants. There is more to explore about this flame. Perhaps the Fire Monks can reveal more. Fire Monkhood. The Fire Monks are guardians of the Flame of Ruin, forbidden by the Earth Tree, and said to be kept high in the mountaintops of the giants. Monk's Flame Blade, curved sword with a flickering flame motif, wielded by the Fire Monks who came out from the mountaintops of the giants. The monks came to the land of Liurnia in pursuit of a fugitive who stole their fire. Who would steal it? What's their motivation? The Greattree is now but a vast sprawling network of roots, but they still live. You have to imagine that the tree would have been massive, reaching high beyond the clouds because the roots reach every catacombs in the lands between. On the doors of the catacombs is one of the most important reliefs that gives us insight into the process of life and death. People are literally born from the tree, allegedly. Tarnished Archeologist has an insightful look into this whole perplexing topic if you're more interested in this line of thinking. For now, let's roll with it. The tree makes people. This marks clearly and distinctly that people existed in Farum Azula, and the reason behind this style of birth taking place. The presence of the Greattree roots in Farum Azula is explained by this notion, and if we look at the Gloam-Eyed Queen's presence here, it gets wonderfully complex. The most plausible answer, it burned down.
O Earth Tree, you shall burn.
Marika rigged the system so no one else could take it. This is when the Elden Ring would take its new form. This is how the process of budding was able to take place, as so eloquently highlighted by Tarnished Archeologist. The Crucible tree helm sheds more light. Helm of the Crucible Knights who served Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. This turns out to be a little bit of history rewritten on behalf of the victors, I think, because Placidusax ruled as the first Elden Lord. Going back to the helm, the Greattree ornamentation is the Knight Sluria's mark, displayed also by her men. Holds the power of the Crucible of Life, the primordial form. This conveys a dual meaning to me. Also, if the Greattree was fighting for its life, perhaps there was an incantation cast upon the Greattree to hold it up. The Halig tree is also weak, so the tree was propped up using structures around it to try and support the tree. So then the biggest question becomes, what happened to the Greattree?
For the flame to burn the Earth Tree, a sacrifice is needed of one who envisions the flame.
There's never any mention of who Queen Marika dethroned. The only clear answer right now would be Placidusax's god who fled. The fire giant is a survivor of the war against the giants. Upon realizing the flame of their forge would never die, Queen Marika marked him with a curse. O trifling giant, mayest thou tend thy flame for eternity. The war against the giants. Champions battle. Trolls betray. Fire vanquished. The era of the Greattree begins.
The rune of death goes by two names. The other is destined death, the forbidden shadow plucked from the Golden Order upon its creation.
Marika was a well-known scholar and historian, and she learned from history. She knew that every empire falls, so she made a system to circumvent that. Thus, the cycle was born. In order to ensure the cycle would continue, she removed the rune of death. Maybe knowledge from the future cannot be perceived in the past. Melina being burned and bodiless does have its advantages. She might have been sent back in time by Marika herself to resolve an issue with the Empire that she failed to predict.
For my purpose, given to me by my mother inside the Greattree.
Knowing that no leader is perfect, she made the perfect contingency. The fact that she was able to depose her predecessor proved that no leader was perfect. Unlike many tyrants, she learned from others' mistakes. Gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss. Greattree's favor, a talisman depicting a special blessing of the Greattree. It is said that when the age of the Greattree began, such blessings were personally bestowed upon their recipients by Queen Marika herself. In depictions seen in the Greattree sanctuary and Marika's bedchamber, the Greattree is depicted as more round and bushy. Keep this in mind as we move forward.
Those blissful early days of blind belief are long past.
So if people are born directly from the Greattree, that would mean that the Age of Plenty means that people were being born often from the Greattree. During this time, Godfrey was the first Elden Lord. The Greattree's old sap becomes amber, treasured as the most precious of jewels in the age of Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. So, in this case, perhaps God is the one who gives birth based on the vessel and the shape of the Elden Ring. At this point in history, the Elden Ring is depicted as a supple Celtic tree, surely the combination of Godfrey and Marika, with what appears to be detached leaves at the top. This is why there are eras of birth. For instance, during the age of the Crucible, there are many births happening that reflect the chaotic nature of the lands between. According to Miyazaki, Elden Ring is the name given to the mysterious concept that defines the world itself. Beings born with horns, tails, and wings. There's the misbegotten in the Omen. This Elden Ring is reflective of that chaotic nature. Quote, "The rings that you're looking at in the logo are not so much a representation of those factions, as you put it, but more a representation of the law of the world, the rules, and the order." Then Marika changes the shape of the ring. Different and new births happen because of that. So it is clear, the shape of the Elden Ring changes. If our Tarnished were to speculate, Mohg and Morgott both have great runes they inherited that could have been derived from the Elden Ring that formed before the Age of Plenty. There is not a lot of information about this era. The Nox heresy allegedly happened in this era. Estelle is also either summoned by the Greater Will or the Nox, and blows shit up. According to Quelaag, it's a big-ass mystery. Godwin is born in this era. He defeats Fortisax. What's important is that they form a friendship out of mutual respect, and the dragon cult forms. Something that goes unnoticed by many in the community is that the shape of the Elden Ring changes in this era. It's subtle, but it's clearly defined within the shackles that bind the royal Omen brothers. a fetish bathed in golden magic. Shackles were used to bind the accursed people called the Omen, and these ones were made to keep a particular omen under the strictest confinement. Though faint, the shackles still retained vestiges of power, enough to trap the once bound Margaret on Earth, if only for a short time. Marika's time as an Elden Lord should have come to an end, but she continues to reign for yet another cycle. There appears to be another form of the Elden Ring depicted on the highways connecting the Eternal Cities. This represents some kind of power struggle to me. Marika, having reigned for 2 cycles, meant someone had to challenge her. I think that challenger was the Gloam-Eyed Queen. However, she is felled by Malekith. Marika decides to change the shape of the Elden Ring, removing the Rune of Death.
Destined death.
Malekith was betrayed by Queen Marika, making Malekith the vessel for the Rune of Death. And so the Golden Order begins. Quote, a superior incantation of Greattree worship. In the beginning, everything was in opposition to the Greattree, but through countless victories in war, it became an embodiment of order. It's important to note, Radagon and Rennala married not that long after the Golden Order had formed, and had Ranni, Rykard, and Radahn. Then Radagon studied Glintstone at the Academy. Radagon abandoned Rennala, then went back to the capital and married Marika. Once again, we see the shape of the Elden Ring reflective of new law. After this, Fundamentalism took hold. Thus, Miquella and Melina are born. The Night of Black Knives occurs, and Ranni admits,
I stole the Rune of Death, slew mine own Empyrean flesh, casting it away. I would not be controlled by that thing.
The final form of the Elden Ring is forged in the Shattering, according to Marika's hammer, stone hammer made in the lands of the Numen, outside the lands between, the tool with which Queen Marika shattered the Elden Ring, and Radagon attempted to repair it. The hammer partially broke upon shattering the ring, becoming splintered with rune fragments. There's also rune fragments found all over the lands between, which reads, a shard of the shattered Elden Ring grants a blessing of an equipped great rune upon use. It is said that the lower arc of the Elden Ring received its bounty, and this is a shard of one such arc. Finally, of course, our Tarnished brandishes and reforges the Elden Ring to bring in a new age. Quote, Fundamentalism describes the Golden Order through the powers of regression and causality. Regression is the pool of meaning that all things yearn to eternally converge. There are 7 different forms the Elden Ring takes, perhaps even 8 if you count the one on the roads connecting the Eternal Cities. The Elden Ring gets smaller and smaller until it is shattered and reforged. There is a possibility that the Elden Ring we are presented with were torn from the base of the Elden Ring in Malekith's boss chamber. There is no denying that this Elden Ring did exist. So then what is required to reforge the Elden Ring into a new shape? Heat. There is a missing piece of contextual evidence here. Occam's razor. Marika went to the forge for the same reason our Tarnished did, to brandish the Elden Ring and reforge it to bring the Age of Plenty. Remember how Marika went to the mountaintops of the giants and felled their god? I believe one of her goals during this era was to capture the flame and embody it into a demigod.
The Greattree governs all.
There was also the shape of the Elden Ring, 4 rings but rearranged differently. This is depicted on one of the highways connecting the Eternal Cities. It's clearly different from the shape of the Elden Ring on the front of the Greattree. Given the iconography around the Eternal Cities and the taboo of those who live in death, I speculate that this Elden Ring was what the Gloam-Eyed Queen intended, but it never came to be. The same can be said for what I believe to be Miquella's intended shape for the Elden Ring, which combines characteristics from both his mother and his father. Remember, it was Marika's goal that everyone knew that she was the one true god. So, for this process to take place, heat must be applied. As so brilliantly noted by Tarnished Archeologist in his 3 creeds of the Greattree, a thick layer of ash already covers Lindell. The Traveler's Close. worn by a young woman who set off into the world to confront their fate. Notice the leatherwork on the belt. It's Celtic. It was once thought the blessed sap of the Erd tree would drip from its boughs forever, but that age of plenty swiftly came to a close, and with time, the Erd tree became more of an object of faith. The incantations Melina cast brandished the seal from the age of plenty. Smoldering butterfly, an eternally burning butterfly found near the wildfires and elsewhere. Material used for crafting items. Serves as kindling for a number of items. Melina's eyes are solid gold. Zuli the witch recently examined textures of eyes. The only others to have full golden eyes are Godric the Golden and his offspring, the last of the golden lineage.
Make of thyselves that which ye desire. Be it a lord, be it a god, share them with me. Your thoughts, your ambitions, the principles you would follow.
The Erd tree was once perfect and eternal, and thus it was believed that the Erd tree's seeds could not exist. Usually, he causes seeds to disperse in plants in nature, hence the description for the golden seed. A golden seed found at the base of an illusory tree. When the Elden Ring was shattered, these seeds flew from the Erd tree, scattering across the various lands, as if life itself knew that its end has come. Marika could have burned her competition, making way for an entirely different tree, the Erd tree, an illusory tree that cannot be burnt. This is also evident in the questions being posed within the description of Golden Rune 3. Grace that dwells within the inhabitants of the lands between, the lingering trace of gold. Even now, runes are still imbued with the power of life itself. Do you see the Erd tree towering over there? Why pose the question if it does not imply another meaning by the subtext? The subtext behind the question is, some people do not see the Erd tree itself. According to all these contextual clues, the Erd tree burned during the Shattering. So this is when we get the last depiction of the Elden Ring. Marika is stabbed through the womb with what appears to be a fragment of the Rune of Death. Marika, being depicted in this way, paints a clear picture. She has been punished by the greater will for her actions, and the consequence is that she can no longer give birth. However, I think there was another consequence to this action.
It happened during the golden age of the Erd tree, long before the shattering of the Elden Ring. Someone stole a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malekith.
Later, the Rune of Death spread across the lands between, through the underground roots of the Greattree, sprouting in the form of Deathroot. Deathroot was the greater will's way of achieving balance, through a coup carried out by Marika's own children. This is where Melina comes in. Melina is implied through the internal game files to be the daughter of Queen Marika. This is supplementary at best. However, consider what Melina has to say when taken to the foot of the Erd tree.
I have to ascertain for myself the reason for which I live, burned and bodiless.
If she was a demigod or even an Empyrean, then perhaps her two fingers reside within the Round Table Hold. It is her that takes you to the Round Table Hold after all. I believe that Melina served as kindling for Marika to forge the new shape of the Elden Ring. Melina burned the Greattree, which belonged to Placidusax, and his god who fled. The Erd tree forms from a husk of what was left of the Greattree, and the Elden Ring, during the age of the Crucible. And again, she would have been used during the Shattering.
I was born at the foot of the Erd tree.
Melina could have been the first demigod conceived, as a sacrifice to burn the Greattree and reforge the Elden Ring.
Burned and bodiless.
Burning her firstborn child is what brought her power. So when standing at the mountaintops of the giants, it becomes clear that this was the purpose given to Melina.
I shall see to the kindling.
She would have been the eldest of Mohg and Morgott. Perhaps she cannot remember her purpose because every time she is used as kindling, she loses her memory. So it is here that we learn why Melina eternally smolders and how she rekindled the revolution.
Hello again, old friend.
So let's speculate on the expansion. I think that Melina will be the one to greet us again, especially if it happens in the past. I was unfamiliar with other Miyazaki games until going down a rabbit hole and finding Quelaag, who does awesome lore deep dives on her channel. Miyazaki likes to time travel, so I believe that Melina will greet our Tarnished once again. Taking a note from Quelaag here, this time we will be participating in the Crucible era. It would be interesting to see the events that led up to how Marika came into power. I think that Melina will have a major role in the story, and her identity will be revealed more certainly. The general community consensus is that the expansion image is depicting Mikola. Here are some details that have drawn my attention about Mikola. The Halig tree radiates silver and gold. There are silver sparkles constantly flowing through the air. I think initially it is meant to give more of a feeling like our Tarnished is breathing a mold. However, I see this as a mirror to the gold that emanates from the lands between. The red leaves of the Halig tree also harken back to the Crucible era. Finally, I really want to know what is behind this door, and I think Melina will be the one to help our Tarnished find out. I am new to the Souls community, and I am a baby that was badly whooped by the hands of Shigeru Miyamoto himself for just wanting a story. I played Elden Ring in anticipation for Tears of the Kingdom, and when the game got delayed, I immersed myself deeply in the lands between. From what I understand of the Souls universe, games don't really connect, but they could. For now, I will explore the lands between. I follow many other creators in this space, including the works of Smoughtown, Tarnished Archeologist, Ziostorm, Latividia, Square Table Gaming, and so many more talented creators. The lore community feels inviting, so consider myself invested. So, if you made it this far, and you like Elden Ring or other gaming lore, consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a like, and engaging with my ever-growing community. Thank you so much to the supporters of the channel. I really couldn't do this without you. I have a Patreon if you'd like to help support the channel. It would mean a lot. Your support is what keeps this channel going. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
And thus, the accord is fulfilled.